Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining in with SAME's professional development call today. As you all know, Jeff Duguid is the mastermind behind all this and the one that set it all up. I'm Lisa Thaley. I am the chair of the Young Member Council, so I get the privilege of just welcoming you guys. Thank you for coming and getting it kicked off with just a couple announcements and a quick bio of our speaker today. Just so you know, I have muted everyone on the call. So at the end, we will have some question and answer time. You guys can ask him questions on his presentation, any conversations we want to have at that point. Before we get kicked off on that, though, I have 3 quick announcements from the Young Member Council. First one is we will have some stipends for young members for the Small Business Conference in Pittsburgh in November. Those should be up on the website today if the application is not up already. They will be due back to headquarters on September 15th. So if Small Business Conference is something you're interested in, but not something your company is going to fund you to go to, please take a look at that and apply. We will be giving 5 away. The next monthly Young Member Council call is next Thursday. It's always the second Thursday of the month. We are expanding that agenda to include ideas, thoughts, comments from post-level young member chairs. So if anyone is a post-level young member chair and wants to dial in, give us some feedback, just hear what's going on and how we can support you guys, please join us. Or if you're not able to join and you have an idea, please feel free to contact me. All of my information is on the SAME website. And lastly, we do have the Credentialing Awards Achievement Program open again this year. That's for any young member who is going after a new credential. SAME can pay part of your sitting fee, part of your exam fee, part of your all of those kind of fees that come into play. So please take a look at that on the website. The application is there, and those are due October 23rd. So there is still some time left to go ahead and get those applications pulled together. So with that, that is all my just housekeeping things. So kicking off today's presentation is by Tim Geiger with RS&H. Tim is a regional leader and senior architect for RS&H. RS&H is a full-service, multidiscipline architectural and engineering firm. Firm was established in 1941 to support the DoD in war efforts and has been working with the DoD and its contractors ever since. During Tim's 13 years of experience, he has worked with numerous federal clients, including the Army Corps of Engineers, NASAC, the Department of Commissary Agency, NASA, as well as some private launch providers. 5 years ago, when he was working with DoD's schools through the Army Corps of Engineers Norfolk, he realized an opportunity to marry his love of architectural design and gaming. Working internally with some of RS&H's technical resources, he figured out how to quickly export a BIM model into gaming software, allowing DoD's non-technical users, specifically teachers and administration, to get into their school before it was designed and give feedback to the design team, which ultimately led to having some schools that are much more efficient from the teacher standpoint, but more importantly, giving these better facilities to the children of our servicemen and women. Since he figured this out with DoD, he's also implemented it working with NASA as well as private clients. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim for the presentation. All right, Tim, you should be good to go.
Okay, and you can hear me all right, Lisa?
You're good to go.
Okay. So today we're going to be going over designing in the 21st century using virtual reality. One of the reasons I put this presentation together, I've presented to a couple of different SAME groups, and it's really just to kind of show our path from what we are currently using into the virtual reality environment. I'm sure a lot of folks online are already creating models in Revit and SketchUp and other platforms. And really, this just kind of shows you that it's really not too much of an extra step to kind of get it into that virtual reality environment. This is kind of the path that we took, and I'll kind of go over that. And if anyone has questions, I think everyone's muted right now, but there is a little chat box, so I'll kind of keep an eye on that. As we go, if anyone wants to ask any questions along the way, just please type it in there, and we'll address it then. Or at the end, we can take everyone off mute and answer some questions then. So as far as standard visualizations, like Lisa said, about 5 years ago, our company was providing some of these standard items as far as creating our Revit BIM models. And as many of you are doing, you're doing all disciplines. So you've got architectural, structural, mechanical, electrical, And all that information is already being created in 3D. And a lot of times you're showing this in renderings or models and fly-throughs, where you actually guide the camera through a path, do a rendering, and then you can show the clients kind of a specific view of what they want to see in the facility. And then the last item there was 360 view. So this is where we started to create like a single point inside of a building and render kind of a bubble view of that. And we could actually put the client in there, and they could, on the computer, a 2D on their screen with their mouse just kind of guide around. But you'd actually be able to see a specific point within the facility and get a little bit better understanding. So for us, that was almost the start of this VR look around, and but it was only for one single place in the building. So kind of a virtual reality history. It's kind of come a long way in the last couple of years, but it was first introduced around the 1960s as computers and also kind of an interface, and the visual interfaces were coming out. And a lot of this was done for the military. It was very expensive to do back then. Not many people had computers, obviously, until the 90s in their homes. So large corporations, then the military was putting a large portion of the money into development of virtual reality capabilities. And one of the reasons is if they're going to spend millions of dollars or billions of dollars on planes or tanks, they had that kind of goal of the final financial goal there. They would put the money forth in the beginning for this really early virtual reality technology, and that kind of helped it grow in the beginning. But again, it was a long way out of reach for smaller companies, and especially any kind of home user. So recently, though, there's been some large technological leaps that have helped to bring it up in the last 5, even 10 years. And one of those is the cell phone. Everyone now has a cell phone in their hands at all times, and also TV technology, and that really brought down the pixel size, and also brought down the cost. And those items are a lot further in reach with this new upcoming technology. Also sensors, and then also processing speed. So those are 2 other items that many cell phones now had. It made the sensors a lot smaller, a lot cheaper, and also processing speed was really increased. So you could now have graphics cards that could really do this kind of stuff just day to day without having to have large, room-sized computers anymore. And then also battery life, and we'll get to that a little later. Right now, a lot of this technology we have is directly plugged into a computer, but as batteries increase in efficiency, you're able to actually leave, the desk and kind of walk around in areas, and that battery technology really helps with that. So as I said before, we had kind of the stagnant renderings and videos. So what is the virtual reality environment now that we're creating? So some of the words, some of the buzzwords is immersive media or computer simulation. So that's where you're actually able to get someone and put them in the actual space. They're not looking at it on a 2D piece of paper or a poster. They're not just guiding it on a screen in 2D, even though that helps people start to understand the virtual reality environment really immerses the person in there. And until you kind of put the headset on and the headphones and really get in there, it's kind of a hard thing to explain, where you really start to feel like you're in the environment. And it's a computer simulation. So you're not just looking at the stagnant environment, you're actually able to interact with it and kind of touch and feel your way through this environment. So some of those interaction tools, besides just seeing, you actually get to touch items. So you've got hand controllers now. We can reach out and feel things. The volume and the hearing, the headphones actually helps out a lot with kind of making you feel immersed in that situation. We found even just a bird chirping or a fire crackling or something can make someone feel like they're actually in that space, where before, if it's just, you don't really get that from the space. And also the sound is done in 3D. So as you walk through a space, things get louder. When you turn your head, you actually hear stuff differently from different locations. Other parts of the interactive control, opening doors or moving items. So as you walk through a space, it's not just a dead space. You may have other characters walking through that space. You can open doors, explore areas, ride elevators. So it really gives you that third dimension of being able to move throughout it. And then moving items, which is something we're coming along with, and that's as far as furniture and stuff. Maybe it's arranged a certain way when you get into an area, but you can actually interact with that environment and carry stuff around and modify the systems and the colors. And then also level of intensity. So with virtual reality comes many different levels of intensity. Just putting the headset on, sitting at a chair, you could, again, kind of sit and look around a single spot in space. So kind of the next level is allowing people to move through that space, giving them a hand controller like an Xbox controller or a mouse. And that level of intensity increases with each of the additional kind of pieces of equipment you give someone. And I've done this in conference halls before, or set up an exhibit where folks will walk by, and a lot of people put the headset on, they just kind of stand there and look around. But then you have other people that really want to get in and start kind of walking around and almost heading off with the wire still. So that level of intensity and immersion, it can change for different people, and some people are apprehensive about this, but I think the younger generation really kind of picks it up and takes it forward, and really dives right in. So I'll just go over the process we used, and I'll go over some of the other programs that have come out more recently. But when we first started doing this, the process was, it's pretty straightforward, but it can be a little overwhelming for someone just to jump right in and kind of, take up from the beginning if you're not into some of the other kinds of computer software, if you've mostly just been in the design field. So what we do first is we select the model that we want to put into the virtual reality system. And you got to be a little bit selective about as far as the pieces and stuff you want to bring in. So the next step there is to simplify. And especially programs like Revit, they come in very heavy as far as the polygons and stuff that they bring in, and also as far as overlaps. I mean, these programs, as far as Revit and some of the other ones, are designed specifically to create design documents. So when you're trying to bring that into a virtual reality system and a gaming system, those systems really are looking to accept a native format or something that's more specifically designed for a virtual reality environment. So there is some simplification you have to do, especially when you're bringing in systems as far as HVAC, plumbing, in the architectural realm, much of the furniture or cabinetry. Those are the items that are very heavy as far as the data is concerned, and will kind of slow down the program. So the first thing in the process we would do is to simplify. In that second view, you see that's just one quadrant of the building. We rarely will do an entire facility just because the models get so heavy. After that, we would export to a transferable format. We use the FBX format from Revit because it interchanges pretty well. A lot of the materials come through. It is a little bit of a heavy of a format, but like I said, a lot of data is not lost when we do that. There is a step I didn't put in there, and that's kind of an advanced one, which is to bring it into 3D Studio Max. And it really depends on what level you're looking to provide to the client. So in 3D Studio, we would clean up as far as the polygons. We clean up some of the textures. We would bake some of the textures into there. And I'll go over this a little bit later as far as the levels of quality, but you can go straight from Revit into some of these engines, and it looks pretty good, and it really allows someone to feel the space. But if you want to go really deep in as far as how the textures look, how the lighting looks, a lot of times you will bring in a third-party program to kind of get that model more up to snuff before you bring it into the gaming engines. So there in the top right, we have an import into Unreal Gaming Engine. We started out using Unity 3D. That was one of the first gaming engines that adopted the Oculus Rift, which is the system we're using for the headgear. So we originally started with that one, but once we got into Unreal, it's a lot more user-friendly system. Had a lot more assets that were able to kind of instantly pop in. It really, I think it looked a lot better from the start than the Unity 3D. So we're actually kind of converted over to the Unreal Gaming Engine. So we've imported into that, and that's what we use now. In the bottom left, you can see we optimize the textures, create cameras, and then player controllers. So when you bring in a model, a lot of times you'll just bring in the building model, and you'll want to create as much of the kind of background environment and the player controllers as you can inside the actual gaming engine. So we'll bring the building in, and then we'll kind of recreate the site sometimes because it looks a little better with the trees and the planting around if we're doing an exterior scene. And then as far as interior, you have to create a controller where you actually drag and drop. And a lot of these programs already have kind of these pre-built assets that you can bring in there, and you don't have to do a lot of programming or settings. You can kind of bring these characters in there, and they already kind of work with the Oculus Rift and some of the other headset manufacturers. One of the good things about these two engines I've mentioned, the Unreal and the Unity gaming engine, is that they are free, so you can download them. You don't get some of the advanced features, but really compared to a lot of the games out there right now, you're just barely scratching the surface. So the free ones really work pretty well right now. Some of the stuff you may want to spend money on is purchasing some of the assets as far as movable things, cars, people, anything like that that you want to populate the environment with. You might want to do that. Because not everything looks great coming straight from Revit. You may have had cars or trees or something that looked okay in Revit or even in 3D Studio Max, but once they get into whatever gaming engine you're using, because they're not native to that engine, it can be a little clunky. So after that, we would usually finalize the scene. This is an interesting portion because you don't actually have to have the gaming engine to view these files. So not everyone, not all your clients have to understand this file, because once you finalize the scene, you're actually making a .exe. So you're making its own program that once you send it to a client, or once you want to show it to someone else, you can put that on any computer and it will open as if it's its own program or game in this situation is what they've created. So that really helps us with sharing these files. You don't have to have people downloading a gaming engine and kind of getting into that separate program. It comes as its own piece. After that, we'd always test the navigational software. You want to make sure that whatever computer you're going to use for the item you've created, that it really works well. A lot of computers right now don't, if they're a couple of years old, may not have the horsepower to really make something look smooth and to work well. So you want to make sure you test that out on anything before you take it in to see a client or anything else like that. So we'd always do that step right there towards the end. So here's just a couple of the areas where we've used this. Schematic design. This is the Camp Lejeune High School, and some of the things that the virtual reality environment is great for is kind of this rapid modification. So as fast as you can change the Revit model, once you have the scene set up with all the player controllers and some of the other items I mentioned, you can then drag and drop the Revit model in there pretty quick, or SketchUp or anything like that. And a lot of times it'll update quickly, and you can turn it around and show people stuff pretty quickly. So once you've done that first leap, I think it really does go quickly for those rapid modifications. Also during schematic design, experiencing scale. And again, you don't have to really go to photorealistic renderings to actually be able to show someone what the scale of a space is. And that's been very helpful with schools as far as the cafeterias, the commons, some of those areas. We've also done airports for this system. So that's another one where the space is kind of large. You can kind of get a feeling and a sense of the scale and how people will interact in that environment when it's full or empty, and really get a feel for that space. And then also stadiums is another one where you have a vast change of scale as you walk throughout a stadium, and it gives you a good idea of how that's going to feel. Another thing during schematic design is client involvement. A lot of times it's tough for clients to look at 2D paper as far as construction documents or plans, and kind of understand how big a space is. So one thing we noticed that we get great client involvement when we use the virtual reality system. You can put someone in that space, they'll walk around, they kind of get excited about what they see, but they also have a lot of good comments. They immediately notice certain things they don't like as far as where placement of certain spaces are, colors on walls. So we found that it's very helpful to get the person in there and really let them feel around the environment. We've also used this at the bottom there, building entry and also site selection. It's very difficult to give someone a sense of how their building will look when they walk from a parking lot, up to the facility, and really look around as you're walking up there. So we've used that to kind of show them a couple different sites at the bottom of site selection, and how that facility will look as they enter the site. And you can even do site selection with even simple mass models. So you don't have to bring it again to that really high fidelity level to give someone an idea of how it may look. You can model some of the background buildings around the facility, and then let them walk the site and how their building is going to fit there as far as scale and entry to the facility. And then during design development, we've also used it kind of throughout the entire process, even to construction administration, but finding interferences. So this is a big one. especially with some of the work we've done on launch facilities and big complex mechanical rooms. Again, it allows a maintenance person or someone who's going to be using this equipment to come in and look at some of the clearances and immediately understand, at the push of a button, they can walk around and understand exactly what that space is going to look like. You can find interferences. We've done that a couple times, where even stuff that we haven't noticed in the model, when you're actually walking around, you see that maybe something doesn't have the proper head clearance on a stairway. We found a situation. So it's just nice to be able to walk around those spaces. We can also turn on clearances for these systems, so you can walk in there and see if you're going to have enough clearance to operate that piece of equipment or to open that panel, and whether it's going to interfere with other teachers, administrators. You have people that really, don't know the design process, don't know how the construction documents get created. So this really allows the design and the design development to be accessible to that person where it would not have usually been accessible. We do a lot of government projects, so something that's actually we didn't really expect it to happen, but the anti-terror force protection folks, there's a lot of more regulations on the federal side as far as how you construct a facility, how it's seen from the exterior, once someone gets inside, what they can see, and how lockdown procedures work. And a lot of public schools also go through this, but for the military schools, this really helped us out to kind of show them exactly, they have a lot of prescriptive measures in place that show exactly how they want the facility built, but obviously not every facility kind of fits into that mold. So when you have a special situation, putting them in the virtual reality environment allows them to take a little different look at it and see how systems will work for this specific facility. So that's allowed us to not skirt regulations, but to address certain regulations in a different way, and to kind of meet the need of the school and the need of the protection of the students without having to follow the specific letter of the law and not work correctly for that space. And then also client involvement and buy-in. Again, you don't just have to bring the teachers and administrators in there. We've brought students into classrooms before, let them walk around. And it's interesting to see the different comments you'll get from a student than you will from a teacher once they are put in that environment. And then you can get buy-in from all the users and kind of everyone who's going to be involved in that project. Here's just one of the examples of one of the spaces we use. This is Camp Lejeune High School. This was a week-long charrette that we went up and spent at Camp Lejeune with the teachers, the students, the administration, the base personnel. And you can see that in the background there is kind of an image taken directly from the system. And excuse me, it's not really the highest quality. Again, we were there for a week-long charrette where we kind of went from zero to having what's in front of you and having them walk through that on kind of Wednesday or Thursday, and they made comments. We were able to change it again for a Friday outbrief meeting. And like I said, the level of detail and stuff is not quite where you may want it for some clients, but to be able to show someone a walk through their facility in less than a week was something that they really enjoyed. They really could get some good comments. This kind of style was specifically difficult. What you see here, we call it a neighborhood, and that's kind of going from the classic school modes as far as having an individual classroom with a teacher to kind of a 21st century teaching mode. We have a lot of different spaces for a lot of different activities as far as one-on-one teaching, small groups, full classrooms, then also a multi-classroom group. So this was a good example where we had teachers that were very used to teaching in a certain facility, and we were trying to change that up and show them this new facility, and they didn't really quite understand. So this gave us an opportunity to throw them into this and really walk them around and show them how this system could be used. Some of the unique stuff we have here are these glass partitions you can see in the background, and then also a bunch of different furniture layouts. So what we did was in the computer, we had a couple different settings where we could, as they walked around, you could push certain buttons and it would either open up the glass partitions, it would open some, close others, and that way we were able to show them how this new space would work. It would rearrange the furniture to different ways, so you can see over here on the right, there's kind of a circle of chairs, and then on the left we have a large group lecture setting. So So they could see how they could still teach in their old methods. If they wanted to set it up as a lecture, a standard classroom, or if they wanted to open it up to the adjacent classroom or have even smaller spaces. So this is just an example of how really in unique situations, this system kind of shines and can convince some folks of how the space will actually work. Another area we've used this is for our transportation projects. We do a lot of roads and bridges. And those large projects, that's where you really have a lot of public meetings and community involvement. And that's where this has really shined, is when you go and redesign perhaps a bridge, the existing bridge remains, and you're going to build a new bridge next to it. It really changes the landscape of a lot of these small towns. What you're seeing there is I-4, but the I-4 corridor in Florida. But we've done some smaller projects where, like I said, it will really change the way a town looks. So just showing them a single rendering, a lot of folks may not understand how that's going to look. So we can model the entire city on both sides, the waterway between, and then we let people, kind of walk around different locations. You can take a ride over the bridge in a car and kind of look out your window and see what the new roadway will look like. So kind of the goal is to have someone to kind of get in their virtual reality car and take a drive, from work to somewhere else, or really have them have a full understanding of what the change in their environment is going to look like. Along with that, we've done animations that had pedestrians and bikes, stoplight simulations, and also traffic simulations. And it's kind of nice that software is actually able to be imported into the virtual reality software. So once it's in there, you can actually see how the traffic will look, how congested it might be, where folks will be walking, take a pedestrian walk. And with the controller and the headset, you can actually walk some of those paths and understand that stuff a little better. So we've really had a good success with this, and some public meetings will bring the system out. So after the meeting is over, people on the board, or actually people from the community, can come up and kind of experience it. And like I said, we've had a very positive response to a lot of those meetings. So some of the advances in virtual reality, like I said, currently we're using Unity and the Unreal Engine, and those are specific for gaming. So bringing some of the models we have in is almost kind of a side, or only scratching the surface of those gaming engines. They're not really designed for what we do necessarily. It's kind of been, it's designed for some of the Oculus Rift and some of the virtual reality side of it, but not necessarily designed. So VR is becoming native in many of the other programs now. So as far as Revit, you may not have to export anymore. You can kind of use what's called Revit Live, and it's relatively new. It's still coming along. We've got some folks that have kicked the tires on a couple of these programs, and so far, some of them are a little clunky, but they do let you experience the environment quicker than really going through a lot of the pain maybe for some of actually putting it into a gaming engine, some of that knowledge transfer. So by putting it into some of these other programs, you're kind of taking a shortcut into the VR world. So now one of the downside is most of these are not free. I think Revit Live we looked into is about a little bit over $200 a year, and Enscape is another one where you export your Revit model and it kind of natively comes into this program kind of already set up. I think that one's about $500 a year, and then Iris is a couple $100 a month. So for the free programs, for the gaming engines, there's a little bit more of a learning curve, but you do get those items for free, and you kind of kick the tires there. But for some of most of these have free trials you can go on and try it out. So maybe step in and try a couple of these different native engines, and then kind of pick one and move forward. One of the other advances is kind of a full body interaction. At first, we mostly have had folks sitting in chairs with the virtual reality headset on, and then like an Xbox controller used to walk around. And although that's a simple method of doing it, it doesn't feel very natural. And when we've done exhibits and stuff, we've really had people, it's kind of uncomfortable to stand there with a controller in the middle of a large space with people walking around. And it's just, I don't know, it hasn't been fully natural yet. So this is a company called Zero Latency, and there's a couple other companies that are coming out now. And this will really allow you to have multiple users in one space where you can see each other, and then also a free roam environment. So the way the model is built, it kind of keeps you within these walls, but it at least allows you to walk around and explore. It's a much more natural movement to just have to walk around. You don't have a controller in your hand with a stick. And like I said, from doing presentations and exhibit hall stuff, the younger crowd really doesn't have an issue with the controller, but a lot of folks really have a problem putting the headset on and getting into that environment. And it's this will kind of make it a more comfortable way to move around in there. So besides that, there's also other user inputs that are coming along. The top left there is the Omni, so it's kind of a disc where you put special pads on your shoes, and similar to the previous slide, it feels like you're walking around the space. It's a little less natural, but it does kind of give you an infinite landscape. You can walk in one direction and never hit a wall, so your model is kind of free to be as large as it wants. We have not tried this system out, but I know that I think they're on their second or third generation out to the public. And I think that's one system that'll probably, come along, is so you can stand in a single room and still kind of wander the environment. Top right and bottom left, we've got just some hand controllers. Again, when we first came out with the virtual reality system, it was mostly about using an Xbox controller with sticks or maybe triggers. But these new systems, as you move your hands, it's recognizing that movement. It's following that, and it kind of it gives you a much more natural feel again. Top middle, we've got a system, and we're kind of working on this, is to be able to change the environment live. So the first thing we've kind of experimented with is textures, just changing the color of stuff. You can type, or you can code into the program to kind of allow specific items to have maybe a rotation of different textures. And this, you can bring your client in, you can have a restroom with a couple different tile samples selected, and as they roll through it, you can select different tiles, and they can really see what the environment's going to look like. It's also been very helpful with lighting. A lot of times lighting is something that's it's difficult to experience on either a drawing or even through renderings. So when you're actually in the space, and you can have lighting controls, maybe color, or also dimness in a conference room, turning on and off different lighting levels or different lighting schemes. We found that to be especially helpful when sitting with a client, kind of going over what those different schemes look like. And then the bottom right, you probably recognize that, it's a Kinect from Xbox. That was kind of the first, level of motion detection, but that's also coming a long way. So where right now you have a lot of detectors in the headset and also in the hand motion controllers. I think the way most stuff is going, kind of the next generation, the next 5 to 10 years, will be kind of lose all that. You'll still obviously have the display, but it'll just be watching you, and it'll be understanding all your movement without a lot of interactive tools that you'd have to hold or experience. So that's all the good stuff. Most of the challenges, though, is what I'll go over next. And let's see, starting with time. So obviously, we're already making a lot of our 3D models. We already have a lot of that data already created. It just does take some additional time to bring it into these programs and make that happen. So with time, obviously, comes money, because you have to, you have to get these kind of things into your scope of works, and you have to get your clients to actually want to pay a little extra to see and experience these environments. So these two images are actually the same space at different render levels. So at the top right, that one's kind of a direct export right out of Revit, not a whole lot of cleanups. This is something we might show during a charrette or a quick client meeting. And then at the bottom there, that's the photorealistic. You spend a lot of time with the reflections, with the colors, with the textures, put people in there, so we have movement. We also have sound in some of these. We have there's kind of a movable stage in the middle of this space. We have options to move that space in and out. So again, all these things just take a little extra time, and you have to be able to judge with your client and kind of get to know these systems to know exactly how far you want to take it down that road. And it's just going to take you a little bit more time and money. Also, client knowledge. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of this isn't in scopes of work. When a client goes to find a designer, they may say, hey, I want some renderings, or I want an animation, but so far not many of them come forward and say, oh, I want a virtual reality simulation. So a lot of times you really need to educate your client as far as what would be provided with this and see if they've, something that may help them out. So I'm educating the client on that. Also, a lot of them are apprehensive about putting the headset on. Until you've used it a couple times, it is kind of strange because you're putting the headset over your eyes and ears and kind of going into the system. So it kind of pulls you away from where you currently are, and that can be a little uneasy and apprehensive for some of our clients. Also, a challenge is still in development. So they've come a long way in probably the last 5 years, but it's still in that steep curve as far as what is coming out, which technologies to use. You really have to do some research to understand the pricing and kind of what fits into your budget and what you want to provide clients. You can start out at kind of the base bottom or go into the hundreds of thousands of simulators, or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of simulators. And I think a lot of people don't really know where they fit on that peg yet. Hopefully this is kind of giving you a little bit of knowledge as far as the path we took, and a lot of the stuff didn't end up being that expensive as far as we already had the models. It took a little extra time, a little bit of equipment, but we were able to kind of get into the basics and get our feet wet and get an understanding of the technology. And then also the user interface. Again, a lot of people don't want to put the headset on, but a lot of people don't know how to use some of the controls. So if you're at a meeting with clients and you want them to immediately be comfortable in that situation, it can kind of be kind of tough to put them in that space and have them be comfortable there already and just focus on the design, not necessarily how to use this, clunky tool maybe for them. So user interface, I think, is one of the challenges that'll be kind of overcome as it becomes more natural and they develop more systems. Some of the other challenges, large file sizes. Again, the Revit models aren't kind of a native file format for the gaming industry. A lot of times games are built with very optimized polygons and very small file sizes so that they're quick. They can react quickly, and also they really model detail where it's necessary in a video game where they think that you're going to see something. Whereas Revit, everything's kind of modeled to where it is, and once it's imported, that's where it takes some of that time to kind of get the file size down and get rid of some of the stuff you really don't need. And one of the words that may not be familiar with is latency, and that's with virtual reality, latency is defined by that time between when you make a motion and when it actually appears or you see it on the screen. So if you turn your head and the screen doesn't show you, your head being turned and show a different scene very quickly, that can kind of make people ill. So large file sizes, that can be a problem. So the smaller file size you have and the lower quality, it works a lot faster, and it's almost seamless when someone turns their head as far as what they see. So again, one of the challenges is the better quality. So getting that quality up can kind of slow down or make that file size large. Those are two items that are, as one gets better, one gets worse. So that's just one of the challenges that's being overcome right now. And then also mobility. We have a lot of desktops in our office that can easily handle the files, but we have very few laptops that can. So you kind of have to be specific on the hardware that you choose if you're going to want to take this to a client meeting or take this to a, an exhibit or something to show off. You want to make sure that whatever hardware you have. Up here we've got an Alienware computer. A lot of those can handle it for anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000. And then also as far as a video card for a desktop, anywhere from $800 to $1,000 about to get a good video card for a desktop. And you can almost always handle the larger files with a desktop than you can with a laptop. The technology just isn't quite equal yet. So a lot of times if we have very large files, we'll have to bring folks into our office to sit down and look at some of those files. So those are some of the challenges, and then just a slide kind of on the future of where the VR design is going. Multiple user interfaces, and a lot of this has already taken place in the gaming industry. Really, this is kind of the future of where I think the design industry and kind of our company sees some of the advances and stuff that we would like to get into, and that's the multi-user interface, interacting with one model at the same time. So it's nice to be able to put a client in there and have them walk around, but it's even better when you can sit next to them and actually have a group of people walk through a model and kind of have a discussion on hand. So you can, you have a microphone, you have headphones, you walk through, you actually get to discuss specific pieces. You can showcase certain parts of the project. And, somewhere where that comes in especially helpful is, say, a theater or a bus stop or even a classroom where you want to have multiple people doing individual activities, and that kind of helps out with that. Also animating objects inside the virtual environment. Right now we don't do a whole lot of that because again it takes a little additional time, but we've done some doors that open, we've done some videos on screens, and anything you can do there to add to the virtual reality experience is good. So all those animating of objects is stuff that we'd like to bring into what we do a lot more. Also creating objects in the environment and also controlling those environments. So again, we'd like to experiment a lot more with, say, moving walls or doors, changing textures, changing lighting, and I think that's kind of the future, is to be able to get into your Revit model or get into some of these 3D models and actually start to move pieces around. Also continually improve graphics. So as the graphics increase, we'll be able to make our models look a lot better, and similar to the world of animations and just 2D renderings, that's come a long way in the last couple of years. I think too, with the virtual reality, it's going to get a lot cheaper and a lot easier to make stuff that looks very high quality. And then also that user input. So having more companies and more spaces where you can walk around and video track and have an open environment where you can actually walk around instead of being stuck at a desk. I think that's an area that we would like to experiment more, and I think the design industry will move towards that a lot more also. I was going to open it up for questions now. If you want to unmute folks, Lisa, we can see if anyone has any specific questions on some of the equipment.
Okay, I believe everyone should be unmuted now.
Yeah, I didn't see anything come through in the chat. I didn't know if anyone had any specific questions, though.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I had a question when you were talking about sound. My name's Daniel with HiCaps. Can you mimic what the acoustic experience of a particular space is going to be? Is that what you were alluding to?
We haven't actually done any simulations as far as making sound in one area and having like acoustic panels on a wall or something that would mute that. But the stuff that we have done is that in the virtual reality or the gaming systems, you have the ability to put sounds in certain places. So you could let someone, if you had a classroom next to another classroom, you could let some of that sound bleed through of how there may be some distraction or not. But I'm not sure we've done a ton, or I'm not sure if we actually are able to mimic that sound. I don't know. I've got Emil Alawas. He's one of the guys that helps me out here, and I always let him answer the question also. Go ahead.
Like Tim said, we can't do a lot with the acoustics, but you can have a source of that sound, and as you get closer or farther, the volume will increase to how close you are to the source of that sound.
So you could potentially give someone an idea or an impression that I might need more sound insulation, but you couldn't necessarily, you trying to see how an auditorium or something, that would be pretty darn advanced.
Yeah, I think there are simulation softwares that would do that, but not really piggyback into the VR environment. But I think, like you said, you can give an idea of, hey, when you're standing in a space, you're going to hear, distracting sounds from a certain area or traffic or something. You give them a sense of that, but not necessarily a calculated what it would sound like.
Okay, thank you.
Hey Tim, this is Jeff Duguid. Can you tell us what have been some of the best lessons learned that RSNH has experienced using VR in design?
I would say one of the best lessons learned is that it doesn't come seamlessly from Revit into some of these programs. There is a little bit of time it takes to, and the more you can simplify some of the models before you export, I think that's probably one of the best lessons learned. Once it's into the virtual reality program, you can do a whole lot with the VR side of it, but once the model's in there, you can't do a whole lot with the model side of it. So you're going to want to make sure that that model is a little bit prepped before you toss it into some of these VR programs. And also just file size. We've tried some really large files. Like I said, originally we wanted to do the whole school so that someone could, walk throughout an entire, it was King Solver Elementary School. And we just kind of getting smaller and smaller pieces until we finally figured out about one of these neighborhoods, which is kind of a little hub area with 4 classrooms around it. That was kind of the best quality we could do with the current software and the current hardware that we had. So a lesson learned is that, we started to understand the file size and the level of quality that we could fit into a model and still have a nice smooth experience. Because sure, the whole model could come in as a school, but after about 2 minutes, people were starting to get a little green because it was too much latency. It wasn't a smooth experience. So really having a smooth experience will help out with whoever you put in that environment. That's probably another big lesson learned, is that the smoother you go, the better. And there's a couple different kind of functions within the virtual reality system that'll let you know how you're doing as far as frame count and stuff. And you can watch those and make sure that you're staying up there at like 90 frames per second. And when you get down to about 70 or something, that people are going to start, not enjoying the experience. And that's what you definitely want to watch out for.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, Emil was also mentioning furniture. A lot of times the actual building model isn't nearly as clunky as some of the furniture we bring in. And once you copy a chair 100 times, you really have a lot of polygons, and that'll slow it down almost more than anything else.
Tim, I had a question. You mentioned some NASA work or aerospace work. How have you used this virtual reality for facilities or launch facilities of NASA work?
We've designed for NASA. We've done some interiors on the vehicle assembly building. We also did a mobile launcher for them for some of the new space systems that they have, and those spaces are very complex when it comes to the kind of mechanical equipment as far as piping, HVAC, moving arms. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that you really don't get in a normal facility. So using the virtual reality for those systems, or for those facilities, really helped us out from how do you fit humans into a large machine almost. So we were able to find a lot of interferences that, just looking at the model in section or even in 3D, we weren't really able to see that until you walked someone up and down, many levels of this tower, and you could start to see where there were interferences with kind of how a human would interact in that environment. Oh, and yeah, Emil just mentioned there's also some pieces on here that actually move. So if you have like an arm that extends or something, you can kind of look at in a segmented way in design, but also once you get into the virtual reality, you can actually move maybe an arm out to a vehicle and back and make sure that all the clearances are right, and that it's not, that people can stand there during that kind of movement, and where some of the stay out zones are.
Great, thank you.
Any more questions?
Well, hearing nothing, I think that's it. Thank you, Tim, for coming out and volunteering to share your time and your expertise with the Young Member Council. We greatly appreciate it, and this has been very insightful. I hope that everybody has gotten something out of this that they can take back to their own firm and continue this conversation moving forward. So I thank everybody for joining us. If you have a topic or a speaker that you'd like to recommend for our next professional development call, please drop an email line to the Young Member Council and let us know. We'd be happy to follow any and all leads. And we want to hear what topics and conversations you'd like to see on these calls, and we'd like to help get those in. Our next professional development call is actually next month, the 7th of September. This call here in August was a little bit delayed, so our regular scheduled is next month, the 7th, and we are going to be hearing from Ben Dooley, who is a motivational and leadership coach, and he has helped hundreds of clients think outside the box and is one of approximately 800 master certified coaches worldwide. Ben has been coaching for over 25 years and helps facilitate left brain thinkers to access their creativity and right brain thinkers to help harness their focus and goals. So I've spent some time talking to Ben over the last few months and found him to be an incredible speaker, very insightful, and so I know that you'll get something out of that. So the registration for that call will be opening up soon, and I'll send out invitations shortly. And finally, if PDH certificates will be going out next week, if you don't receive one via email, it means that I don't have your information here. You're showing up on our meeting as a caller who didn't enter an audio pin. Just drop me an email next week, and I'll be sure to get you a PDH certificate. With that, thank you all for joining us. That concludes our webinar today.